All right, ready to start? A little hot here. How's everybody this morning? Good? Excited to be here? That's right, it's Interface, Seattle. It's good times. Lots of exciting things going on in this world, in our industry these days. So, well, I want to get started right away. I don't want to delay because my presentation, 45 minutes is probably not enough time to talk about this. So first off, thank you to everybody at Interface and the Zylogics team for inviting us to come and speak to you guys this morning. I really appreciate the honor and the opportunity to get in front of you and talk about this topic. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I've got a lot of data and a lot of information on it. So this is security analytics, new technology for emerging threats, and I'm Andrew Plato. So let me talk about, before I get too deep into this, I want to talk about what my intention is today, what I hope to accomplish. First off, this is a massive, gigantic topic. It's a very emerging technology. So what I want to first start with is I want to define what security analytics is as a market, as a technology. And then on the latter part of this presentation, I want to talk about what does it take to implement and integrate and make security analytics work in your environment. And you'll find out toward the latter part of this, it's pretty difficult to do. So my hope is that by the time you leave this, you have a good working knowledge of what security analytics is, and you can start talking intelligently with your organization and vendors and other people in the market. So I've broken it up into 3 sections, and if you haven't figured out, we've got a theme going on here. Okay, real quick. Let me introduce myself. I'm Andrew Plato. I'm President and CEO of Anitian. I've been doing information security for about 20 years. And I've been involved in thousands of projects. I've done a little bit of everything in this industry. And those of you who have known me or seen me at Interface speak before, you kind of know my story. But I've been around in this industry for a long time. As has Anitian, our company. Anitian is an information security intelligence firm. We are dedicated to empowering leaders like yourself become better at securing your organization. And we do that through a variety of services, compliance, we're a PCI QSA, we do penetration testing, code review, risk assessments, we do incident response and forensics. What we do not do is we don't sell product. So I don't know if any of you know that, but Anitian exited the product resale business. We do not sell any product anymore at all. We decided to leave that business because it's frankly a pretty horrible business. Okay, again, before I go too deep, I want to give you guys a couple of premises and assumptions about this presentation. Number 1, this is a very new, very emerging market. So the things I'm going to talk about today are still very formative. There's a lot of debate, discussion, disagreement about this. Secondly, as I mentioned before, Anitian has absolutely no financial stake in any of these companies whatsoever. We do not sell security technologies at all. Lastly, our data for this presentation comes from a research project that we did in the latter part of 2013 the early part of 2014. Anitian was commissioned by an organization to do research into the security analytics industry. We interviewed over 24 different people in this industry, including CIOs, CISOs, as well as people from these companies. This research is based on those interviews, data collected, and other analytical work we did to write a research paper on this matter. After we concluded this, the company we did this for agreed to let us publish this information publicly. Okay, so section 1, as I said, if you hadn't figured out what our theme is, you should know by now. We've got a whole Sherlock Holmes theme going on here, particularly the new Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is a good place to start. This is a quote from the Sherlock Holmes books. The world is full of obvious things that nobody by any chance observes. Sherlock Holmes, it turns out, is actually a very good symbol or analogy for what security analytics is in today's world. We need essentially a digital Sherlock Holmes, and that's what security analytics kind of is. The reason all of us find the Sherlock Holmes story so exciting and interesting is because he's such a brilliant guy and he can figure things out. He can take little bits of data and piece them together into some, to crack the case, to figure out, where somebody's from based on, little tiny bits of information. And ultimately, that's what security analytics kind of is all about. It's taking lots of things and piecing them together into one whole. Now, the truth is, we all know the problems. I'm not going to spend a bunch of slides here reminding you of all the problems because you already know the problems. All I got to do is put Brian Krebs' face on a page and say, here's the problem, Brian Krebs, right? Okay, we all know what I'm talking about, right? The reality is it's easy to hack systems. It's extremely hard to detect those attacks. The amount of data that is out there is absolutely gigantic. Big data is big. That's its mere definition, right? No human being can ever expect to stay on top of this. It is absolutely ludicrous to think that any one single human can manage the massive epic tons of data that is out there. And the security technologies that are in the market today are failing to keep up with the evolving hackers, hence why things like this happen, this being the Home Depot. But what are those technologies that are failing? Number one, antivirus. Antivirus is becoming increasingly less useful in an organization. Most AV products, the best ones on the market, can get to about 95 to 98% effective. Well, that remaining 5 to 2% is a gigantic hole by which hackers can drive all sorts of things through. And therein lies the problem with antivirus. It just simply cannot completely cover any organization. Even antivirus vendors are fessing up to this. Symantec, which is of course one of the largest AV vendors out there, admitted that AV is dead. Now that doesn't mean you throw your antivirus away. It means this is not a defense for your environment anymore. It is not enough. If antivirus has failed, so is SIM. How many of you have a SIM technology in your environment? Yeah, okay, a few of you. How many of you like it? I'm not going to see any hands on that. SIMs have become an anthem for one of the problems with security analytics because they're so big and so complicated and so massive. And because of that, they don't really provide the value for most organizations. There's an immense barrier to operationalizing, there's a big word for you, these technologies. They're not delivering the kind of value. They're not telling people when they've been hacked. They're just, data's going into them, but nothing's coming out of them. We've also had a failure of incident response. This is a chart that I pulled from the most recent Verizon data breach report. This is an absolutely fascinating chart when you will look at the data. So this covers 10 years of breach detection data, right, 2004 to 2014, okay? Now, at first glance, you're probably like, ooh, lines and graphs and stuff. Okay, what does that mean? Here's what it means. Since 2004 to today, how break-ins have been detected has gone from, most of it was detected through fraud. There's some sort of fraudulent transaction, somebody saw a bunch of fraud happening and then they figured out there was an attack, right? Fraud and internal were the two main ways that breaches were detected. In that intervening time, see what these other two lines have done? This red line is third party. And this green line is law enforcement, which is also a third party. Third parties now account for the majority of breach detections. What does that tell you? Nobody's watching the data. There's all this data inside an environment, nobody's paying any attention to it. And the only time companies are finding out they get hacked is when somebody from the outside tells them. Target found out they were hacked, the executives by Brian Krebs. Home Depot, a lot of the other big breaches, guess where they found out they got hacked? It wasn't from their InfoSec team. It wasn't from their managed security provider. It wasn't from their massively awesome, cool technology that they spent $1 billion on. It was Brian Krebs who told them. One of the most recent attacks we did, where a company had gotten completely owned and was siphoning traffic off to do clickjacking and other types of things so that they could fund terrorist organizations. The organization found out they were hacked when the Air Force Cyber Command showed up at their front door and says, "You've been funding ISIS." And they're like, "Ah, you're kidding." The data isn't available when there's a breach, also because a lot of these technologies are not configured correctly. So we've got this situation, this perfect storm of technologies that aren't serving our needs. And what we really need is we need some capability to take the technologies, to take the data, to put all this together so that we can find not only the needle in the haystack, but the needle in the stack of needles. Because a lot of the technologies that are out there, a lot of these vendors out here that you're going to talk to, they're going to generate a million, billion, trillion alerts the minute you plug it in. Which alert's the bad one? So now you have not only the needle in the haystack, but the needle in the needles. So what we need is a technology that can crunch data, handle information, and give that force multiplier. Turn all of you into Sherlock Holmeses of information security. And that is ultimately what security analytics is about. It's taking all these technologies and bringing them together. Okay, so let's talk about what this technology is. This is my best way I can describe security analytics to you. What it is a combination of technologies and practices and procedures kind of crunched together. So at the beginning of this, you have threat intelligence, and I'll talk more about each one of these. You have log data, so you have a SIM or log data, packet data. You've got network and endpoint protection capabilities, and then you've got incident handling tools. You munch all that together, that's a security analytics platform. It's a cohesive platform that includes all of these capabilities put into one singular pane of glass type technology. Okay? The problem is, as you can see, is that there's a lot of different pieces to this. And how they come together is, this is where the problem is right now. We're right in here somewhere in the technology. There's a lot of this, I don't know what the heck is going on here, kind of stuff. Okay, the first part of security analytics is threat intelligence. All security analytics platforms have to, at some level, have some form of threat intelligence. So what is threat intelligence? It's a catalog of known bad actors. Basically, it's some kind of heuristic technology, database, some sort of intelligence that has the ability to discern between known good actors and known bad actors. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You don't necessarily, there isn't one sort of monolithic way to do this. You can do it through things like host and IP reputation, although that is decreasing in value rapidly as companies use content distribution networks. Because the minute you have a content distribution network, it's very easy to game that system, and you can't blacklist a content distribution network, because anybody can use it. It can be things like system behavior. It can be things like file combinations. It can be heuristic mathematical computations. The source of this intelligence is very diverse. It can come from lots of different places. But the key thing here is that you gotta have it. If you don't have some sort of threat intelligence, you don't have a security analytics platform. Because without that, you can't do the data crunching. You can't do the needle in the haystack, needle in the needles kind of stuff. You need that intelligence integrated into the technology. But it's more complicated than that. Threat intelligence in and of itself is not security analytics. That technology in and of itself has to be mated with other technologies in order to make it useful. Now there are a couple of dedicated threat intelligence players, and the idea behind these is they provide like a threat feed for you. So they'll provide information about known hackers, known malware, known devices. And some of these you can integrate with your SIM product. So ThreatStream, CrowdStrike, Cyber, these are some of them. However, when you really start to think about it, almost every security technology out there is in the threat intelligence business. Even your UTM that you bought, or your next-gen firewall, at some level has some threat intelligence built into it. But in order to have a platform, you have to have some kind of intelligence. Okay, the next big part of security analytics is behavior analyzers, or, as are more commonly known, breach detection technologies. So this is going to be your technologies like FireEye, Wildfire from Palo Alto. There's a bunch of these out there, Cylance, CrowdStrike, etc. What these technologies do is they analyze the behavior of systems, files, networks. Basically, they're looking at stuff to determine if it behaves in a malicious or attacking sort of way. And this could be either network or host-based. So you've got some host-based breach detection products, you've got network-based breach detection products. Most people know the network-based ones. The most common core technology used here is sandboxing. And those of you who are familiar with it kind of know what sandboxing is. I stole this from Palo Alto because I really like their diagram. They've got this cute little bug guy with a little mustache on it. That was just adorable. Leave it to Palo Alto to have good marketing, right? Anyways, the idea is that you have these files, you put them in some sort of sandbox, you run those files, you see how they interact with the system, and then you determine whether it's behaving in a malicious way, one way or another, right? And so you use these sort of virtual slicers to do that. And then if it's okay, then it's fine, it passes on. If it looks like malware, then they can produce a pattern, add that to their database, and be able to detect it. There's a number of pretty big players in this market. FireEye, SourceFire, and Dambal are probably the big leaders in this market. With Palo Alto, Fidelis, Fortinet, some others kind of bring up the rear. And then there's a bunch that are kind of immaterial or irrelevant. FireEye is probably the one that most people know. They're definitely the big player in this breach detection market. They have a threat intelligence built into their technology to do this detection of malware. Okay, so that's the network-based ones. Then there's also the host-based ones. This is a market that's a lot smaller, and quite frankly isn't very well formed right now. Really, the only one that has any significant presence in the space is Bit9 Carbon Black. But, quite honestly, Bit9 isn't really a host-based breach detection product, even though they want to tell you it's a host-based breach detection. It really is more of a whitelisting product, which isn't really breach detection. That's a whole other debate. We won't go down that too deep. What you got is a lot of kind of up-and-coming products in this space. SourceFire has their FireAmp product. Palo Alto Networks bought Cyvera a little bit ago, and they've been rebranding that under their Wildfire name. Cylance is a company, and I'll talk more about them in a little bit, CrowdStrike, etc. The big question is, where are McAfee and Symantec in this market? That's a very good question. Keep that in your mind. The other big part of security analytics is data analyzers. So you have threat intelligence, that's one piece. You have breach detection or behavior analyzers, that's your second piece. The third piece, and the third big piece, is data analysis. So that ability to take the data that's coming in, crunch it, and analyze it. What this really is kind of an evolution forward of what SIM correlation technologies do. So you're talking about fusing multiple points of data, normalizing that into some format, and then sifting through it and looking for patterns of known bad actors or known behavior. And you can use many different kinds of data. Log data and packet data are probably the most common, but a lot of them have also started to integrate vulnerability data, application layer data, and other threat intelligence type data, and fusing that all together. In order for these to work, you've got to have a lot of data. Which means if you don't have the data, a data analyzer isn't going to really do what it needs to do. There's a couple of big leaders in this space. RSA almost single-handedly kind of defined this market, and they do tend to be a pretty big leader in this space. But IBM and Blue Coat, with their acquisition of Solara, have kind of been making a big name for themselves as well in this space. But again, you've got some interesting challenges. Texas Cyber, for example, makes a really interesting data analysis tool. Right? Razor Thread, Arbor Networks has an interesting technology. Again, why no Symantec and McAfee? It's a good question. Why is Splunk over here? We'll talk about that in just a minute. What's happening here is you're seeing a convergence of technologies, right? You've got these breach detection, you've got threat intelligence, you've got behavior-based endpoint products, you've got data analyzers. All of this is converging into common platforms. So the companies are trying to create a singular platform that can do all this analytics for you. That's good. That's exactly what we want. Here's the problem. Nobody quite has this. As much as the sales guy out here wants to tell you they do, they don't. The only one who's close is Blue Coat, and I can't believe I'm saying that to you. Because 2 years ago, if you'd said Blue Coat was an innovative company, I would have fell on the floor laughing at you. But something happened at Blue Coat. Tom Bravo bought them, interesting things happened, and they have a pretty interesting converged platform. RSA's kind of there, IBM's kind of there, Palo Alto and Splunk could get there if they wanted to, but they're merging all together. A lot of them still rely on SIMs in order to get their data. So these are the companies that are, based on our analysis, we had a very positive impression of. These are innovative companies. These are companies that have interesting technologies that are going places. And let me highlight just a couple of them. I already mentioned Blue Coat. They've got an innovative converged platform. Blue Coat's biggest problem, they're owned by Thoma Bravo. Thoma Bravo is a private equity company. Private equity companies, all they care about is squeezing every last little dime they possibly can out of companies. So that doesn't necessarily make for a stew of innovation. They also own Tripwire, which essentially they're doing the same thing to Tripwire, squeezing the living life out of that company for every dime they can get. Somebody needs to buy Blue Coat. Somebody will. I can't watch. Thoma Bravo wants to unload that someday, so they're going to. IBM and Q Radar is another technology that 2 years ago, if you asked me about that product, I would have said, this thing will give you more heartburn and heart attacks than it ever should. Now it's actually a pretty interesting platform. IBM's put a lot into it. The problem is, you've got to buy things from IBM, which means you've got to basically buy completely into their entire religion. That isn't so good. Palo Alto is also on the cusp of having a pretty interesting converged platform in this space. The problem with them is, of course, they're Palo Alto, and we won't go down that path. Cylance is probably the one company that I was most impressed with. Amazingly simple and amazingly effective product. Stuart McClure started this company. He's a former McAfee guy, hired a bunch of bright guys. The problem with them, I think they're running out of funding. That isn't good. This company needs to get bought. So if you know anybody with a few $100 million, get them to buy Cylance and put it behind them. Cisco and SourceFire was an awesome story. When Cisco bought SourceFire, everybody got sort of like, oh, what's this really mean? At first, it all felt pretty good. It felt like Cisco was going to do good things. Yeah, well, we know better than that. Cisco hasn't screwed it up yet, but they're close. All the greatness that was SourceFire has the potential of getting lost inside the Cisco world. But that much being said, their network-based detection and breach capabilities are quite good. They have some pretty negative impressions as well. Quite frankly, I was rather surprised at how underwhelming RSA is. And the problem with RSA is that EMC doesn't know what to do with RSA. They're kind of lost in the mix and mash of everything. And they've never quite gelled as a company. Their products are good, but their execution's kind of, it's inconsistent. Frankly, though, I'll tell you personally, my biggest problem with RSA is their absolute non-stop assault of fear and fanaticism in their marketing. They did this video about a year ago. You can see it on YouTube. It is an absolute cringe-worthy video. It's, I don't even want to, it's just so awful. FireEye is another problem company. Although they have very good technology, they have suffered one loss and problem after another this year. They bought Mandy, and it all felt good and exciting and fun, you know, pushing these two awesome companies together. That went directly to their head. They're just way too darn arrogant for their own good. But here's the bigger thing. NSS Labs did a full test of breach detection products, and FireEye was the least effective of all of them on the market. Surprisingly, Trend Micro, Fidelis, and Fortinet, and believe me, none of us thought Fortinet was going to be on that list, were some of the best out there. There's also malware in the wild specifically written to avoid FireEye's detection because there's so much FireEye out there. The whole Target thing didn't do them any favors either. You need to watch for acquisitions in this space, okay? These guys right over here are all going to get acquired at some point. That could be good, that could be bad. These guys might do the acquisitions if they have any money. Last little bit I would note is that a good security analytics platform should also feed your incident response program. But none of them can really kind of stand alone. So the idea that a lot of these products come in and they come in and sell you on this idea of if you buy our security analytics platform, you'll be able to detect a breach really quick and be able to do something about it. Yeah, if you actually have an incident response program that's fitted to that technology. They don't mention that little tidbit because nobody does that. You actually have to redo your entire incident response program to deal with this technology. That means operationalizing the technology into the incident response program. Right now, again, as I said, a lot of these technologies are still kind of formative. So while they can help your incident response capabilities, and they can give you very, very, very valuable data, there's a lot of sort of preconditions in order to get them. Okay. Moriarty's here to give you the bad news. Well, this started off positive. We've been in, if you haven't noticed, it's somewhat of a downward trend. Now Moriarty shows up to deliver the really bad news that he will burn you. He will burn the heart out of you. I don't know if that's it. Anyways. All right, what does it take to deploy this technology? This last section is really about helping you understand what it is you're going to have to do if you really want to go down the path of security analytics. And a lot of this is intended to just bluntly confront the reality of this technology and this market. So these are a number of questions that we hear or heard people asking. The first one is, do you need security analytics for regulatory compliance? No, absolutely do not need it. So anybody who tells you out here that you have to have your security analytics platform for PCI or HIPAA compliance is a lie. You do need log management for PCI. You do not need security analytics on it. That's another step forward beyond that. Okay? Well, I don't know what I don't know. And that doesn't mean security analytics is going to give you can deepen that hole. The reality is, if you don't know what's going on in your environment, buying more and more and more technology that you aren't able to handle isn't going to make it better. It's going to only make it worse. And a lot of the other things I'm going to mention in this, you'll notice that is a recurring theme. If you're worried about APT or state-sponsored attacks, you need a lot of other technologies first before you kind of go to a full security analytics platform. If you're of the mindset that, oh, my SIM, my IPS, my DLP, my AV, it can't protect us. Security analytics can't necessarily protect you either. It's an analytical tool more than a protection tool. And that's an important distinction. Many organizations still will not configure their IPS and other technologies for auto-block. And if your IPS or your next-gen firewall, your antivirus is not in auto-blocking mode, and you get hacked, you're going to get owned. It's just the way it is. No human being can respond at the speed of a hack. It's absolutely impossible to do. You've got to be doing auto-blocking. The real question you need to ask yourself is, are you mature enough to handle this technology? I'm going to be very honest with you. Security analytics is what we would call a high-maturity technology, which means you must have a very mature security program if you want to implement this technology. And by mature, I mean really mature. All of these technologies or controls should be in place and working before you even talk to one of these security analytics vendors. You've got to be doing all these things. Because in order to make the analytics work, you need all those controls. You need all these controls producing data. And again, when you go out here and talk to the sales guys, they won't tell you this. Because they just want to sell you a box. They just want to sell you some gear. You need to understand where the threat intelligence in these technologies comes from. Does it come from research, crowdsourced, honeypots, John McAfee's drunken rants, which frankly might be very insightful. You'd be surprised what McAfee can come up with, you know, when he's on a cocaine-fueled bridge. Maybe he's on to something that we aren't. Maybe he's on to something. Oh, poor John. We kid John. Comes from a third party. Well, who is that third party? And I'll tell you, the sales guy out here, oh, well, you know, we can't disclose that information. What is it, a flippin' national secret? Tell me how your product works. If you got a sales guy who can't tell you how the product works, talk to a different vendor. Okay? Because they should be able to explain to you how this technology, where the threat intelligence comes from. Frankly, install base and experience are probably the best source. Honeypots don't produce very good data, quite frankly. And crowdsourcing, I know that's a hot topic. Oh, let's crowdsource things. Have you ever seen a crowd and what it produces? Yeah, crowds produce things like mayhem and chaos and burning and other horrible things, right? Do you honestly think crowds are going to produce insightful security intelligence? No, they're going to produce chaos and mayhem and other sorts of horrible civil disobedience. So crowdsourcing, quite frankly, does not produce very good data. Do you have the resources to do this? This is the general rule that we tell our clients. If you have thousands of hosts, you're going to need a full-time analyst working on this. That means a full-time guy drawing a full-time salary, sitting at his desk working on this 40 hours a week. Not a guy who does this, plus manages the firewall, plus manages the password, plus manages the support desk, plus takes tickets from, plus also cleans the bathroom. Okay, this is a full-time job. And a lot of CIOs and CEOs, they don't like to hear this. They're like, well, can't I just outsource this? No, you really can't. Why? It's too dependent on understanding the intimate details of your organization in order to work. And I'm sorry to say, but a guy sitting in a console at 4 in the morning knows dick about your network. Okay? Isn't going to be able to make an intelligent decision about your organization because he's not in your organization. And the other reality I would say is that if you're dependent on a guy sitting in a console at 4 in the morning to protect your business, you're going to get hacked. Because that is the model that works. This is not about producing this instantaneous protection. This is about finding the hackers that are embedded inside the data. Modern hackers do not disrupt your network. They sneak in, they set up camp, and they sit there for a long period of time, and you never know they were there. Target hackers were inside the environment for 4 to 5 months before anybody detected them or did anything about it. And that's why you can't outsource, because they outsourced, look how good it did them. If you can't invest in the technologies and the people to do this, if you can't invest in the people to manage these systems, and quite frankly, you really shouldn't even have it. Do you need a SIM to do this? Yes. If you don't have a SIM, you got to focus on that first. Because you've got to have data. You've got to get all that data into some cohesive platform in order to do analytics on top of it. If you hate your SIM now, you're not necessarily going to like it more when you implement security analytics. Because the SIM becomes even more important and the ability to pull data out of it becomes even more important. The hardware requirements for security analytics is huge. If you're going to do a lot of packet capturing, if you're going to do a lot of data logging and other things throughout a diverse network, you're talking about lots of boxes, or virtual boxes if that's your thing. These are expensive too. I would say your minimum investment to get into security analytics is $150K. And it's probably more like $250K for an organization of any size. You're going to have to store an incredible amount of data. Whatever number the sales guy tells you, instantly triple. Because whatever number he tells you is way too low. Because I don't know what it is about sales guys. They just always undercut those numbers. Just triple the number he tells you. This is the rule of thumb we do. You have a 1 gig network and you want a monthly storage, you need 500 terabytes. You have a 10 gig network and you want a month, you need 5 petabytes. That's 5,000 terabytes. That's a lot of storage. That'd be a lot of hard drives, so it'll be spinning, whatever that is. You're going to need a lot of storage, way more than you can think. And if you're not storing 30 days worth of data, it's going to be tough to actually do any serious incident response. Because you're not going to detect these attacks on day one. It's going to come out of days, if not weeks, if not months worth of data. So 30 days really needs to be a minimum storage point. Now you can start sifting off like the packet captures and only have log data. And if that's the case, that's a lot smaller. But you're going to need a lot of storage. Triple the number. Okay? Keep in mind the use cases that you're going to need to see from these vendors. For breach detection and other technologies, you need to understand how it identifies malware, how it blocks it, how it reports it, how does it integrate with your hosts, how's the false positive tuning done, and how's the updating done. For data analysis tools, you've got to understand how to query, how to walk through the data, and how to integrate it with your incident response. This is something the vendors should be able to walk you through. They should be able to do all of these in an hour demo and show you how to do any one of these items. Okay, I know I've spent a lot of time discouraging you from doing this. And probably you're like, oh my God, this is really expensive. How are we going to do this? If you want to do it, if you want to go down the security analytics route, there is a lot of value to it. It can really help you. I know I've been kind of sounding pretty negative about it, but here's how to do it. Here's the process you need to follow. Number one, you need to go get your resources, which means you need budget and you need management support. Don't have budget, don't have management support, you ain't implementing anything, period. It's not going to happen. You got to have management support, you got to have a budget. I'll just tell you one thing I do know about sales guys is one of the questions they always have to ask you is, do you have budget? If you say no, oh, thanks, clang, clang up. Okay? Just being honest, right? Yeah, of course. You need to be able to master your SIM. If you hate your SIM and you don't do anything with it, it's not going to get better. You've got to master that first. You've got to make sure you have all your data in that, you've got your logs, you've got some correlations. That is going to become very important to making analytics work in the long haul. You need an incident response program. If you don't have our plan, if you don't have one now, write it first so that you understand how you're going to deal with incidences. You need to strengthen your mobile and BYOD platform. Now you're like, whoa, wait a minute, where'd that come from? Why'd you just throw that in there at some point? They threw that in there for a very good reason. That's how bad stuff gets out of your network these days. And if you want to start controlling that data, I do that before you do a lot of this other stuff. You need strong mobile and BYOD control. First technology you want to go after is the network-based breach detection. So this is going to be your FireEye, your Dambalas, your Wildfire, your Fidelis, the thing that Fortinet has that doesn't have a name, whatever. It's going to be one of those technologies. Those are the easiest to implement. They tend to be the most bang for the buck as to giving you insight and value to the organization. You should be augmenting your outbound web filtering or your outbound proxying. What I mean by that is you should be monitoring all outbound web filtering. And you should be doing SSL inspection now. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, my web filter isn't powerful enough to support that. Buy a new web filter. Okay, get a Blue Coat, get a Fortinet, get a Palo Alto, get one of those boxes. You've got to monitor every single web request out of your environment. You need that log. Because if we break into your network, we're going to use that outbound web access to reconnect to command and control infrastructure. We're going to do it over HTTPS, which means you got to see inside the SSL session. That means you got to be doing certificate inspection inside your network. If you're not doing that, you're going to miss a lot of things. You need to integrate the threat intelligence feeds into your SIM, whether that's through a technology like Solara or a dedicated threat intelligence product. You need to then basically take your SIM and start adding these higher level data analytics to it. Upgrading your endpoint detection capabilities would be next. You could probably bounce this one around, but putting some sort of breach detection capabilities on the endpoint, something like a Cylance, or a FireRAM, or a Cyvera, or Trend Micro's thing that I don't even know what it's called. You got to put that on the endpoints. These are tough to manage. They produce a truckload of data, and a lot of that data has to be monitored. Last step is to start doing full packet captures of your network. This is where a converged platform, something like a Solara, something like an RSA Security Analytics and IBM becomes really valuable because they can do this as one cohesive unit. RSA really led this pack in this space. Quite frankly, they're probably the best at doing this full packet capture and integrating that with log data. But again, the problem is they're RSA and there's all sorts of problems there. Last but not least, you need to upgrade your IRP, your incident response plan, to deal with all these new technologies. Okay, last thoughts. Oh, actually, so I can spend some time on this. If you haven't figured out from my presentation, this is a very messy, very formative market. It isn't really even quite a market yet. And that was really the conclusion of our research. Security analytics is an awesome idea. It's an incredible capability. A lot of the military cyber commands have their own kind of systems to do this. This is cool stuff, but it hasn't quite all come to fruition. The market is still in a development mode right now. But there's interesting stuff out there. But keep in mind, if you adopt this technology, you're going to be an early adopter. Which means you've got to be willing to kind of take on the frustrations of being an early adopter. It's only really for high maturity organizations. And by that I mean high maturity security programs. If you're still building out things like patching and vulnerability management, you're just simply not ready for security analytics. Put it on the roadmap out a year or two. Get it in the budget for 2016 or 2017 or 2075 or 2063, you know, right about the time that the Vulcans come to visit us after the Roman Empire starts. Okay? You're not going to replace your next-gen firewall, your IPS, your endpoint AV. Security analytics is not a replacement for any of that. What it does is augment them. It gives you capabilities. It allows you to look inside things. It allows you to find the needle in the haystack or the needle in the stack of needles. It is not going to replace them. Have a written business case and very clear requirements before you talk to any salesperson. Why? Because if you don't know what you're looking for, they'll tell you what you're looking for. All right? That's just sort of our common advice in Anitian, right? You always got to kind of have control over the process before you go out and talk to them. Okay, that's it for the presentation. Hopefully this has been educational and interesting. I'd be happy to take your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. If you want to come up and punch me, that's cool. Just, keep it, above the belt, right? You'll see there's some evaluation forms. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on the content, the presentation, my delivery, this awesome jacket I have, what do you think? Men's Warehouse, pretty awesome, right? I'd like to hear your thoughts, so please go ahead and fill those out. And if you get a chance, drop them off with this fine, wonderful gentleman over here, Sandy Wallace, our account exec, or you can hand them to Megan over here. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter, tweet me your thoughts. Hit our blog. We have a new entry on vulnerability management and one on secure authentication for PCI. Slides of this presentation are available on our slide share. This link will get them to you. You're always welcome to email us, stop by the Zylogic booth, pick up one of our cards, or get us scanned in. We're happy to send you a copy of the slides. And as always, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for being